Welcome everybody. My name is Jose Casanova. I am a professor of sociology, theology, and religious studies at Georgetown University and a senior fellow at the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. And I've been working throughout the year with Tatiana, and I'm very glad that Tatiana is ready to present. Tatiana is a PhD candidate at the Sociology Department of the University of Bucharest in Romania, and has been with us this entire year, academic year, as a Fulbright visiting researcher, doing work on all kinds of issues of transnational moral entrepreneurial activities, movements across the Atlantic and within Europe. Particularly, her main interest has been to understand the role of the Russian Orthodox Church in shaping the foreign policy of the Russian Federation and of the Putin regime, particularly in Moldova, which is her original country, and in Ukraine, two countries which happen to be, according to both for the Moscow Patriarchate and for the Putin regime, they consider integral part of the Ruski Mir, namely of the Russian world, and therefore not really independent, but part of the canonical territory of the Moscow Patriarchate, namely no other Orthodox church should be able to function there, and also an integral part of the near abroad for the Russian Federation. But Tatiana has expanded her interest in studying other movements and, again, interactions between these movements within the European Union. Particularly, she's going to present today on 3 countries within Europe and the referendums that took place there, namely in Croatia, Slovakia, and Romania. And in the United States this year, she was investigating the role of evangelical groups and, again, moral entrepreneurs, US transnational organizations in mobilizing groups, institutions for family values, for traditional values across the world. She was in the process of organizing interviews with several leaders, with several organizations throughout March and April, but then the pandemic came and all of us had to adapt. But I hope that Tatiana will be able to continue these conversations you initiated, and now we understand you don't need to have personal interviews, you can continue the interviews online while you are in Romania. So we are very pleased to have you presenting with the title, Weaponizing God in the Conflict Between Liberal and Traditional Values. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor. First of all, I'm going to share my presentation in order you to be able to follow it and me at the same time. Just a second to see. Okay, now it's perfect. You can see it full screen, I guess. Perfect. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to speak now during this pandemic. It's a great occasion to see all of you and also to present you some preliminary conclusion of my research during this academic year here. Taking into consideration that my scholarship is going to its end soon in the end of the May, I will take several moments from your time to thank, first of all, Berkeley Center for hosting me, Professor Casanova and Director Sean Casey for their time to share their thoughts and ideas with me. Berkeley staff, we have Ruth here, Randolph and others, Claudia, they are keeping me all this time, feeling myself part of Berkeley, including me in activities. And last but not least, I want to thank Fulbright program and all the people behind the program that they give me these opportunities. And of course, all the people that make myself feel here useful and give me a chance to through this research. As Professor pointed already, the title of my presentation today is Weaponizing God for the Clash of Liberal and Traditional Value. It's correlated with my PhD thesis, the role of Russian Church in Russian foreign policy. I'm looking at this particular project as independent, but I can correlate it with my thesis. And the connection with my thesis is how Russia, actually using the religious channel, can build alliances and cooperate with other international actors in order to promote its own goals. Okay, so let's see a little bit, let's talk about agenda. I'm going to present the case of Croatia, Slovakia, and Romania. Then I'll have a little bit of a comparative analysis of all the three cases to point out some similarities and differences. And then I'll focus a little bit more on actors and narratives of the referenda in these three countries. Then I'll make a connection with traditional values coalition and how I define this traditional values coalition. And I'll present you several preliminary conclusions. And if we'll have time, we'll discuss about potential future research direction. And I hope that this your comments and your question will help me to understand where I have to look for to make this research even more accurate and even more deeper. Okay, why I selected the case of Croatia, Slovakia, and Romania? First of all, I have to point that in the last decades, 5 referenda took place in European Union, in the countries of European Unions. One of them in Ireland had as main purpose to legalize same-sex marriage in the constitution. It was successful. The last 4 took place in Eastern and Central European countries, mainly in Croatia, in Slovakia, in Slovenia, and Romania. But in Slovenia, it wasn't a referendum for modifying, to amend the constitution, to modify this definition of family in a more traditional way, heteronormative way. But it was a referendum to secure this family definition in family law. So that's why I'm looking just to these cases, Croatia, Slovakia, and Romania. And from time to time, I'll also point several similarities and differences with Slovenia. My main research instrument is a case study analysis based on comparative historical research, and of course, other instruments like my own observation, content analysis, and so on. And here I present sample of the banners and flyers that that made the campaigns in all 3 countries. In the left, you can see the banners from Croatia, U ime obitelji. This is the name of the organization that initiated the referendum. This is a flyer. This is the flyer. Then we have in the center from Slovakia, banner with Pope Francis. Then we have from Romania, and then from Slovakia. I just want to bring your attention on the main message of this referendum. So the main message was we have to protect the kids, and the children need a mom and a father. Like, so you can see this made by mama and tata, mama and tato. Then you can see the picture with kids, the traditional family. So the organizers, they bolster this very emotional message, yeah, bringing the rights of the kids and bringing this traditional format of family. You can see pictures like with children holding hands and so on. So I don't know why I cannot move it. Let's see. Oh, perfect. And now I'm going to present an overview of what happened in Croatia and Slovakia and Romania, and then to compare a little bit of them. So in Croatia is the very first referendum that is not the very first, actually in Slovenia in 2012, but it wasn't related to the constitution. But in Croatia, actually, it was the first European country referendum that amended the constitution in order to modify this family, this definition of family. And the name of campaign was Every Child Needs Mom and Dad. The initiators, as I pointed, was the civic movement in the name of family. It is kind of coalition that brought together a lot of different organizations, pro-family and pro-life. They collected in several months, they managed to collect 749,000 signatures. They submitted it to a constitutional court for approval. The main player was Zeljka Markic and Ladislav Ilčik. And the question that they the main question was, are you in favor of the constitution of the Croatia being amended with a provision, with the provision that a marriage is a matrimony between a woman and a man? Actually, this last sentence, matrimony between a woman and a man, it is common for all the three referendum, as we will see. The vote presence was 37%. In Croatia, there wasn't a mandatory turnout for the vote because in 2010, the politicians decided to remove this mandatory presence, and political and religious leaders were involved despite of being civic initiative. This initiative had the support as well as religious leaders and political leaders. Okay, let's move forward. In Slovakia, it was a little bit different from Croatia. So first, the Alliance for Family that was formed in 2013 decided to ask politicians to amend the constitution, to amend the article of constitution stating that the family is marriage and matrimony between a man and a woman. The parliament did this several weeks before presidential election, but for them it wasn't enough, or probably they were motivated and decided to collect a signature in order to organize a referendum where they would ask people if they agree or not agree with this definition of family, and other three more questions actually they proposed regarding to the same-sex couples and their rights to adopt children. They wanted to prohibit also in the future the rights for same-sex marriages, and they wanted to give the parents the right to decide if their children have the right to attend lecture on sexual education. So the main player was Anton Kromik, it was spokesperson, but also Christian Democratic Movement, the party that was involved in the first amendment in 2014 when they passed this amendment of definition, but also this party showed support for entire referenda initiative. The vote presence were 21.41%. The referendum failed because in Croatia, in Slovakia, sorry, we have the mandatory turnout 50%. And also as in Croatia and in Romania, we'll see they had political and religious support. Religious representatives were involved in collecting signature, in mobilizing voters, as well as political representatives. And the name of company is clear, it's clear to the kids, and children have the right to a mother and a father, as I already mentioned. So what happened in Romania is pretty similar with the other two cases. The name of campaign was Protect the Romanian Children. The initiator was Coalition for Family, which scholars are saying that it was pretty new, formed in 2013. Actually, it was the moment when in Romania began discussion about the amendment of one article in Constitution related to anti-discrimination law. They wanted to include sexual minority also in Constitution to have being protected from like discrimination. And in Romania, they collected 3 million signatures, and they submitted this the petition in 2016 to Constitutional Court. Constitutional Court validated, then they submitted to Parliament. Parliament in Romania has two chambers of deputies and Senate. In Chamber of Deputies, everything went good, went well, but in Senate, this petition stayed blocked for around 3 years. The main players were Mihai Gheorghiu, Bogdan Stanciu, and Social Democratic Party, the party that was leading the country at that moment. And what is interesting in Romania, the definition is pretty different that was in Slovakia, because it doesn't mention the matrimony between a man and family, but do you agree with the law of amending constitution in the format adopted by the parliament? And the parliament, of course, adopted this traditional definition of family. In Romania also, the referendum failed, 21.1 voters. A mandatory turnout in Romania is 30%. And also in Romania, it was obvious the support of religious and political leaders. All religious leaders, not just Orthodox in case of Romania or Catholics, all denominations. So looking at these cases, I draw, probably you already notice some common feature and some differences, but I want to point what I mentioned, what I noticed, and what I think is important. So in all countries, we saw that referendum came as a demand by civil society representative, describing themselves as pro-family, pro-life alliances and coalitions. Scholars said that there seems to be very new, but we'll see after this that actually the organization that formed these alliances and coalitions are not new. They're working in these countries for decades. The main message, despite of protecting children and their family as a traditional values in Croatia, was they argued that the referendum is needed in order to protect traditional values of Croatian society. In the other countries, we saw the same message, was the participatory democracy. The referendum is a very democratic instrument, and the people have a duty living in this democratic country to go to the referendum and vote like citizens of the country. So the human rights discourse were very predominant here. The referenda in all three countries presented or as reactive or as preventive. So in Croatia and in Romania, in Croatia also the initiative appeared, as scholars are saying, because at that moment the parliament wanted to enlarge the rights of sexual minority, LGBT people. It wasn't about legalizing same-sex marriage, just to give them more rights regarding to health, insurance, and other social benefits. And they are saying that this was one of the reasons why they initiated this referendum. But in Slovakia, as you could notice, the referendum happened after the constitution was amended, including this definition of family. So I say that in the referendums in Slovakia, referendum was preventive, as a preventive measures. They wanted to secure the traditional definition of family in constitution, saying that this is the only one they can be sure that the parliaments and decision makers will not modify it, or it's harder to modify it in the future. We could see that political endorsement and religious involvement was present, despite of the nominations. But what is interesting, despite of the fact that they were supported by political leaders and religious leaders, the initiators presenting themselves as non-confessional and apolitical, and I think this is very important. And one scholar from Croatia interviewing organizers from Croatia, they stated that we are apolitical and non-confessional, but we are looking for the cooperation with the church, and we think that we have to include all religious denomination. Okay, so knowing that Romania is a religious country, also Croatia and Slovakia. So also one of the main arguments why this referendum took place in this country was the religiosity and then the homophobic attitudes. I looked on several indicators from countries to try to understand from domestic factors base what could cause this referendum. It was a demand from people, it was a demand from church, or it was political initiatives. So I put together several indicators and also the outcomes of referendum. So what is interesting that I've noticed that religiosity and also the perception of LGBT marriage from public attitudes is not correlated with the results of referendum. In Romania, for example, where we have a very religious population and very high belief in God, the referendum failed. But in Slovakia, we have like slightly different religiosity. Belief in good is a little bit higher, so failed. But in Croatia, on the other hand, the referendum was successful. And in Slovenia, where we also have decrease of religiosity, the referendum succeeded. You could notice that, so you can notice now that there is also a correlation between religiosity and perception of LGBTQ people. So if the religiosity is high, the disapproval of same-sex marriage of all rights for LGBT people will be also high. But again, this is not very correlated, as I'll show you in the next table. And what is also interesting, if we are looking at the indicators for education and urbanization, we can see that in the country with higher degree of urbanization and higher degree of education, mainly in the case of Croatia and Slovenia, the referendum was also successful, yeah, validated, but not in the case of Romania and Slovakia. And also there is not a correlation with the Christianity perceived as a component to national identity and church-state separation, how people perceive and receive the message of the church cannot be enough to explain. Also, I look how tolerant are people from these countries related to the same-sex rights and a same-sex marriage. And what you can notice in Romania, for example, in 2015, 36% agreed that the LGBTQ people should have the same rights as heterosexual people. But in 2019, after the referendum, 38% agreed. So it was actually a slight increase of approval, not a decrease. And the total disagree was the same. And also when we look at the same-sex marriage approval, is the same. In 2015, we have 21. In 2019, we have 21 versus 29. In Slovakia, it's different because first it was a higher approval, and then in 2019, we could notice a decrease. And in Croatia and Slovenia, actually, the approval of LGBT people rights and marriage is practically similar, not too much change, but we can see that people in Croatia and Slovenia are more open for accepting the rights of LGBT people. Then, I thought that if the domestic factors are not correlated, so they are not enough, or there is not enough evidence to argue that these referenda are internal demands and internal initiatives. And then I started to correlate it with external factors, being also inspired by Martin Moos, who said that in countries, he was referring to Slovakia, he was saying that in Slovakia, referendum appeared because politicians and decision makers were afraid that the laws in European Union will, they perceive this, the movement in European movement, same-sex movement, like a threat, and then they wanted to secure, to prevent that the involvement of foreign actors in country will not be successful. So I thought that this might be one of the reasons, one of the explanation, and started to look at the actors involved in these countries and what was their narratives. And what I found actually is pretty interesting and can help us to make some conclusions. First of all, in Romania, I want to point out that it wasn't a first attempt to modify the constitution. In 2006, Romanian decided to organize this referendum, this initiative to secure the name of the family, the definition of family in constitution, because they was threatened, as scholars are saying, of the pride parades organized in Romania. In 2006, it was the third pride parades organized. And because in the same time in Spain, same-sex marriage was legalized, they're afraid that the Spanish practice will be also applied in Romania case. So what they are doing, they are contacting an American lawyer, Petre Costa, from Texas, asking them to help to initiate this national vote for securing the traditional family definition in constitution. Petre Costa accepted this, and he asked Alliance Defense Fund, now Alliance Defending Freedom, to help them with expertise, because they consider this organization as being with good expertise and good reputation. I want to mention, for the one that they don't know what Alliance Defending Freedom is, it's an organization that more than 25 years has been advocating for religious liberty, the sanctity of human life, freedom of speech and marriage and family. So what Alliance Defending Freedom did, actually, they implant in Romania and also in European Union a new practice, before never being noticed in European context, these amicus curiae briefs. So they collected the signatures. Signatures were collected with the help of Romanian diaspora from the America, also with the support from churches from the America and local level. But the first attempt of referendum failed because Constitutional Court said that it wasn't geographically represented. But this initiative and the organizers, they didn't disappear. They decided to organize by themselves in an alliance. And I put it here, a replica stated by Glenn Levy, EDIFI Senior Counsel at that moment in Clifford Bob book. So Glenn Levy is saying, you need to be involved or you will begin to lose your freedom of religion and values like in US and Western Europe. So they organized this alliance for Romanians with help of IDF and being modeled after Family Research Council focus on the family and IDF. And then when in Romania started in the next year, 2007-2008, started the debate of family law, they sent a letter offering to assist any government in defending its marriage laws. What is interesting, a new actor is entering the Romanian scene, World Congress of Family, and World Congress of Family is a project of International Organization for Family. So World Congress of Family, just a second, has the mission to unite and equip leaders worldwide to promote the natural family. They are sending a petition in support of Romanian defense of marriage, and this is related to the debating of family law and modifying the family law, emphasizing that the European Union in the past has attempted to intimidate those member states defending traditional marriage and the natural family. In 2009, new family code is adopted. It's adopted with a heteronormative definition of family and some prohibition to same-sex marriage, including prohibition not to recognize the marriages that are legalized, that are taking part or took part in other European states. And after this, Petre Costea with IDF representative Roger Kiska is saying that they helped and they offer consultation to several parliaments in Romania to include these statements and to make new format of family law. So now we are at the second attempt in Romania, the second attempt of referendum. Another petition is sent to Constitutional Court. In this case, this time they collected 3 million of signatures. Probably they wanted to be sure that they will not fail or they will not be rejected. Asking again to insert in the Constitution the traditional definition of family. As I pointed before, if Chamber of Deputies, they validated this petition in Senate, it was blocked for 3 years, but all these years, organizations like IDF, Liberty Council, and European Center for Law and Justice weren't wasting their time. They were involved and they made some kind of lobby at local level together with local actors to convince decision makers that this referendum are democratic. This is what happened. This is what why it has to take place. European Center of Law and Justice is the European branch of the American Center for Law and Justice, and Liberty Council cooperates and coordinates its efforts with other religious, liberty, pro-life, and pro-family organizations. They organize several conferences, and at the same time, a letter signed by 13 American congressmen appears in media. Events and conferences were organized in co-hosts like Coalition for Families, ADF International, and Liberty Council. And in one of the Liberty Council events, Kim Davis was presented. Kim Davis probably is popular in United States by being jailed because she didn't want to sign the certificate of marriage of same-sex couple. And another interesting thing is that Zeljka Markic, the actor from Croatian referendum, was also invited to Romania to discuss why a referendum is important and to give arguments. And Ludovine de la Rochère are invited. Ludovine de la Rochère being active or initiator of the La Manif pour tous march in France, which are against legalizing same-sex marriage in France. And I want to point that when Zeljka Markic was interviewed in Croatia, she stated that she was inspired by the France movement, and she decided to organize the referendum being, in her view, a more democratic way of solving this kind of sensitive issues. At the same time, leaders of Coalition of Families, Bogdan Stanciu, were invited to the Hungary World Congress of Family. And after this, ADF mobilized a petition with 40 signatures from European Parliament members in support without delay of the referendum. Okay, let's move forward. I just inserted some samples from Liberty Council, European Center for Law and Justice, where they are sending these amicus briefs to Romanian court, but also ADF were sending this amicus brief to Slovak court, because just these two courts were asked by the president to validate and to verify if the referendum is not against the basic rights that cannot be voted by people. So in both cases, court approved, and here you can see the samples of these amicus or news from the site. And then I spent working in my PhD thesis in Romania when this referendum took place, and I could notice how debates were shaped. And sometimes these debates went so far that there in news appeared different messages like Romanian exit. Yeah, like in that period was talking about Brexit and then raw exit and this anti-EU narrative. So I just looked at the narratives that actors that initiate the referendum in Romania was, and here I inserted some samples. Several samples are from Bogdan Stanciu, the leader that was invited, the leader of Romanian referendum that was invited in Hungary at World Congress of Family, but also a sample from Vladimir Palko, that is former Minister of Interior in Slovakia. And before or the same time with the referendum, he stated that a month ago, the European Parliament adopted a resolution. In this resolution, it calls on all member states of the European Union to recognize registered partnership or marriages of same-sex couples. Ladies and gentlemen, what your answer will be? Then during his discourse at World Congress of Family, Bogdan Stanciu is saying that Romanians now are living mimetic admiration to what they consider to be the true Europe, but actually is the culture of death. So Romania is European not because it's part of European Union, but because of geographical position, of culture, and so on. And now that it's part of European Union, Romania and Romanians have the duty to save the European Union for the fail. And it is saying that Romania has the responsibility to prevent the transformation of this island in a non-Christian ideological project and implicitly anti-European, putting their work during the past years as a goal to liberate civil society from the ideological captivity. And these messages weren't just unique for Bogdan Stanciu or for this representative Vladimir Palko, who is a member of Christian Democratic Party in Slovakia, and who coincidentally he was invited also, or he traveled to World Congress of Family event in Mexico in 2004, but also inside by political actors, domestic political actors, the messages are pretty similar, saying like one quote from Liviu Dragnea, the president of Social Democratic Party from Romania. He was saying that the referendum is needed because the people are frightened by countries where marriage between humans and animals are legalized. Of course, it is not legalized, but it is what he was saying. So, looking at all these narratives, I just thought that they are not singular. The message is very well correlated with other messages inside European Union, with conservative movements, and the messages are very similar with what other political actors are saying, also inside of European Union, but outside of the European Union. So they are using religion to motivate the argument. They are using natural family and then human rights to state why the family should be predominant. So they are defining themselves not as anti-Europe, not as anti-Europe, but anti-European institution. And I read a quote that I want to share with you. So they are not questioning the Europeanization or the Europeanism of their country, but they are questioning their country role in European Union. So they are trying, being part now of European Union, to bring back these traditional values, Christian values, to the Europe, and that it was the fundament of the building of Christian unity. But at the same time, they are fighting with these institutional, like foreign actors, that they are trying to promote this progressive and culture of death, as Bogdan Stanciu said. So looking at this, then correlated with the definition of traditional values, and as academics said that we don't have a common definition of traditional value, a common definition of traditional family values, but putting together, they are saying that this is about religion, it's about religion, it's about family, gender rights, and so on. But what is interesting, that Russia is the singular so far that I discover secular actor, President Putin, that defined the family as being one that have made up the spiritual and moral foundation of civilization in every notion for thousands of years, the values of traditional family, real human rights, including religion, and so on. And when the President Putin is saying this, on one hand, he's saying that, okay, traditional values are the base of what we are civilization, different from the rest of the world. But at the same time, he's saying, but these values are not just for us common. These values are common for other nations, but you have to identify with them, and you have to want to protect them and to ally with them in order to be your traditional values. And that's how, like, looking at domestic factors, looking at these protective measures as arguments why the referendum are taking place, traditional transnational actors' involvement, I conclude, one of the conclusion is that actually we have to look at what happened locally and in referendum to put it in a more broader and larger international context, exactly as human rights network existing, and they are promoting human rights for sexual minority and gender rights and so on. And these decisions are taking place at higher level, European Commission, UN, and so on. I'm stating that also we have to look at transnational actors from the lens of international involvement and how the decisions are making up, and then they are promoting by lobby and advocacy at local levels by local actors and international actors. And I give a name, Traditional Value Coalition, of this transnational movement, conservative movement. It can be religious, political, as different actors, as scholars already stated, but I'm just saying that it's Traditional Value Coalition, and it is formed by political leaders, civil society actors, religious representative who contribute to the shaping of conservative movement on the international level by opposing progressive liberal values and embracing the pro-family, pro-life, and the religious rights approach. Yeah, they are promoting natural law and family as it is stated in natural law. Okay, I played a little bit with the connection. I pointed just several connections and some involvement of transnational actors in Romania. I hadn't time to point it out also to give example of Slovakia and Croatia. In Slovakia and Croatia, the involvement of the actor is not so visible, but there are some connections. As I already pointed, the leader of Croatia movement was invited in Romania, as well as the France representative of March. I pointed also on the involvement of Christian democratic movement in Slovakia referendum and what Vladimir Pako stated, and then Vladimir Pako were invited at the World Congress of Family. Another interesting thing is another member of Christian democratic movement from Slovakia, Jan Figo, is now was the representative of religious or belief outside the European Union, and now the World Congress of Family are sending a petition to European Commission in support of this actor, Jan Figo. And Figo also was together with, or Zelka Marčík was also presented in Slovakia during the referendum together with Jan Figo. So I just formed kind of correlation using social media network analysis with all the connection and how they correlated. And I want just to show you that the main point seems to be all Congress of Families, or at least in my research, all these dots are going there. Okay. So the conclusion that just preliminary one, let's say, that I could draw from this analysis of the cases is that referendum, as I already mentioned, are not singular movements inside or domestic level. They are broader movements, or they are correlated with the international conservative movement because of the involvement of actors and because of the common narratives. The referenda, domestic factors and indicators as religiosity or homophobia, I think aren't enough to explain why this referendum took place at the specific moment in Romania and the specific moment in Slovakia and Croatia. But I think we have to look at to explain the referendum through the opportunity structures theory connected with social movement theory, and so where the scholars are saying that there are several indicators or factors that can make a social movement successful or less successful. In Croatia case, it can be, scholars pointed, the favorable legislation because the mandatory turnout for the referendum was deleted, as well as corruption, what is very common for all three countries, scholars pointed out, the credibility of politicians at one point or the other point, and then civil actors are coming to fill this emptiness, but also another thing can be in Romania, for example, a specific kind of conflict between the leading party, Social Democratic Party, and the European Union. And of course, the connection with these transnational actors and all the building of the transnational conservative movement. I also, one of my preliminary conclusions, I have also, of course, to dig a little bit more, but can be that conservative transnational movement now have become more visible, more stronger, as we could notice in the network. They are present, they have connection with European institution, with UN, but I think they become now more visible also because some political leaders are bolstering this network, this conservative movement, and playing an active role. And I think that now the battle, this cultural value battle with local moral entrepreneurs are taking place in Eastern and Central Europe. And we could notice that Russia now is also trying to insert the traditional definition of marriage traditional definition of family in constitution. And of course, we can connect it with Catholic Church and Holy See, and to look at this. And as last World Congress of Family event showed, we can notice a decrease of involvement of Holy See in this movement. So what I was initially told that these cultural wars are imported from United States by European Union or exported from United States to European Union. Now I think actually that they might be not unidirectionally but bidirectionally. So ADF stated that they decided to move in European Union because they wanted to change bad laws and to implant good laws. And of course, they had this missionary role to secure the family and religious freedom rights. But now I think that they actually are learning, and they can import the mechanism and experience inside the United States. And here I have a short selection of bibliography. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm looking forward to see and to hear your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for your very, very interesting presentation, full of detail, a comparative analysis, but trying to develop also some general analytical points. The first thing I would like to say is that my suggestion will be that you don't put so much emphasis on success or failure, because the criteria are different in all three places. Therefore, Croatia is the country that succeeded the referendum, but because there was no threshold level of participation. Had it had a level of participation of Slovakia, 50%, it would have also been failed. Romania, on the other hand, that has been the one that probably has been the most active and the one that you have worked most, it failed. So I think that for your argument itself, the success or failure of the referendum is not so relevant for the specific points you want to make, whether it is internal or transnational. But besides that, I have a question. Obviously, you've put a lot of emphasis on the Romanian case. Probably you know it better than the others, but also it appears to be the one in which the confluence of transnational factors appears more evident. You have a long involvement of the Romanian diaspora, and through it, of course, of all kinds of US actors. It may have started only as part of the Romanian diaspora, but then it broadened into resources, repertoires, practices which are used in the United States and that were then transferred to Romania. Then, of course, is the Orthodox country that therefore has the most closest link to also the Russian Orthodox Church. And so, and then, of course, it happens to be an Orthodox country, but non-Slavic, that has a particular relations to Western Europe, especially to France. So you have the country in which also the confluence of even Croatian and Slovakians came into Romania. It is not so evident that these transnational factors were already active, let's say, in 2013 in Croatia, so, or even in Slovakia. So my question is it because it was 2018, it comes later, and therefore there was a learning process? These movements had already been consolidated, and this explains these transnational dynamics, or is it because of the unique position of Romania, or both? But I want you to, since you are analyzing these countries comparatively, it's obvious that in Romania the confluence of transnational factors is much greater than in the case of the two Catholic countries, Slovakia and Croatia. So I just want to, for you to think about it, whether it is really unique to Romania, or is it because it is 2018 already as a later kind of development when those things had already been consolidated. Already the World Council of Family has taken place in Romania, in Moldova, in Budapest. So it is a later development. So I just want you to So can you give some reflections on that? Please.
Okay. I think, from my point of view, you pointed that that Romania is an Orthodox country, not so very well connected with Russian Church, and it is true. But I also think that inside Romania Church, Orthodox Church, now are kind of debates. There are some priests that are pro-Russian and some that are not. But looking at the moment that you mentioned, that it might be a moment, or it might. I just look chronologically as I showed, and I've noticed that there were two attempts as I presented. And the first attempt was initiated by evangelical pastors. So it wasn't an initiative by Romanian Orthodox Church. But why I think these transnational actors or these external actors are more visible in Romania, because also in Romania, the petition was stuck in the parliament. So if in the other cases in Croatia and in Slovakia, we saw that it immediately was approved by the parliament, and after the collection of the signature were in 2014, and then in 2015 in Slovakia took place a referendum, here in Romania took 3 years in order to this referendum being validated by parliament. And I think this is another interesting fact that we have to take into account. Probably this is something related with political level, and it's a confluence between the correlation between politics and religiosity, and the degree in what the cooperation between two of them. So I'll think about, and I'll research more about, but I think this can be one of the reasons.
Okay, thank you. Let's open the floor for conversation, discussion. Sean, already, please.
Tatiana, thank you. I mean, this was a fascinating presentation, and I look forward to looking at the slide deck and digging a little deeper. I have some similar questions to Jose's. One, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm actually struck by the relatively low turnout in both of these referenda. And I would like, I think it might be interesting for you to interpret that just as a comparative phenomenon. I guess the second question, so I'd be interested to hear just briefly what you think of that, but also encourage you to think longer and harder about that. But I was struck by those numbers. And relatedly, in many ways, this is echoing a conservative tactic in United States politics that goes all the way back to California in the 1980s, where instead of really being democratic, these were anti-democratic. Very small turnouts were allowed to, for instance, set tax policy in California, which has always disrupted the financing of that system. And there doesn't seem to be any kind of uniform threshold that these different countries have to hit, but it does seem like there is an attempt to mitigate the anti-democratic implications of a referendum with a small turnout, but it didn't seem to be a unified 50% or not, and I just think that's interesting. My second question has to do with whether or not these countries allow foreign campaign contributions. As you know, in the United States, campaigns cannot accept money from foreign entities or foreign citizens. Having talked to Christina Steckel a lot, I'm intrigued by the dark role of money as part of the international system, both the Russian Orthodox spending money in other countries, but also American evangelicals through the World Congress of Families and other entities, and the National Prayer Breakfast, which I'm convinced is, among other things, a money laundering site where hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of dollars are actually moved around the world. Is that illegal in Europe? Is that illegal at the EU level? Is it illegal at the national level, where you cannot invest large sums of foreign money into elections? And I'm just curious if there's a correlation between the performance of some of these referenda and the volume of external funding that comes in. So those are my two questions. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you for these questions. I will start with the second one, with the illegality. And I'm very glad that you mentioned the National Prayer Breakfast. That I want you to mention in my presentation, when the World Congress of Family in 2008 sent that petition asking parliaments to validate the definition of family in family law, and then maybe in constitution. This petition was presented by Petra Kostea, the representative of Alliance for Family in Romania, at National Prayer Breakfast in Romania. So we also have our National Prayer Breakfast, almost all the countries. So this might be one of connection. But you mentioned about the funding of electoral campaign. I don't have data, but I'm pretty sure that it's illegal to receive money from foreign countries, and it can be also sued in court. It's a case. I know for sure in the case in Moldova, it's legal. We now have a case in the role of Igor Dodon, the president of Moldova, which is supposed to took money from Russia. That's why. So I'm pretty sure. I don't know specific in Romania, but I'm pretty sure that it's illegal. But I want to mention that the money could go also to the organization, domestic organization, and this is very interesting because the level of national organization, we don't really have this transparency to see where the money come from. So it was the case in Croatia. It also, I'm so sure that it's the case in Slovakia and Romania. So yeah, we do not have this instrument to verify where the money comes. What I did, I just look at the connection and the speakers and how they act to state this connection. And also we have some investigation, journalistic and human rights, that pointed the connection of World Congress of Family with Russia and so on. So yeah, like generally this is my ideas what can happen, why it's very difficult to see what happened with this line of money. Regarding the low turnout, I totally agree. It was a shock for Romania also. We expected that the referendum would be validated. 30% is not so much. But I think looking at the cases, and I researched a little bit bigger that I presented here very briefly, what I think was the cause one, my assumption is, it is the mixed message of religious discourse with political discourse. In Romania, it is interesting to look how the initiators react. If in Slovakia, after the failing of the referendum, they said that, oh, it is a great result. We gained a lot of support now to promote our goals in the future. And the main reason was to bring the notion of family, this debate of traditional values versus liberal values in the public opinion. So because they already secured the definition of family in Slovakian constitution, in Romania, the initiators, they actually condemned politicians for boycotting the referendum. And so on the other hand, they expected the help, the support of the political leaders, but because the local party at that time was in conflict with European Union and also discredited by citizens, condemning being considered corrupted. A lot of protesters took place on the streets. And when this party took the leading of the campaign, and also together with religious people, they didn't really accept this confluence of religion message with political message, and they didn't, I think they didn't perceive this street as being the main at that moment in the country. I think the moment is also important. When it takes place and how we present it, like being preoccupied by corruption and by economical situation. When you speak about something intangible, it is very hard to mobilize voters, even the message is emotional, and even if something that is the basement of values of Romanians. So I think, yeah, this is very, I thank you that you pointed this.
Yes, Sean, please.
Just two quick follow-ups. I mean, it's interesting, you may know the story of the Mormon Church here in the United States, which intervened in a proposition in California to limit gay rights. And there was a tremendous backlash nationally, in fact, even beyond US borders, against the church collaborating with a group of political actors there. And the Mormon Church in many ways has now stepped back from that kind of public electoral engagement. And so that kind of
Which year, excuse me, which year was that? Because it was before the World Congress of Family in Utah?
Yes,
Salt Lake City?
I have literally the book in my hand. That's
no, it's okay. No, because obviously there was a big backlash after the World Congress of Families in Salt Lake City.
That's right. That's right. The other thing
from within the Mormon Church.
Oh, yes, very much so. In fact, a Mormon historian has written a book called "Gay Rights in the Mormon Church," and I'm hoping to do a book event with him later this summer, and he right. details that. The other thing, I'll tell you a very quick story. When I worked at the State Department, I had a senior staffer who had been the chief consular officer in America's embassy in Romania. And that's the office that gives visas or denies visas. And she told me a story about 1 year before the National Prayer Breakfast here in Washington, D.C. She said a coterie of leading mafia figures in Romania came to her office to apply for tourist visas to come to the National Prayer Breakfast. And she denied them all because they knew who the American embassy knew who these people were. And for years, what they had done is they had applied for a tourist visa, which I think maybe was 90 days or something. So they would come to the National Prayer Breakfast for 2, maybe 3 days, and then they would have 87 days to stay in America and do their professional work. And she rejected them, and it caused this great stir because it was cutting off the flow of illegal money into the United States, both at the prayer breakfast and for the balance of their 90-day visas. So I'm very skeptical about many of the international attendees at this National Prayer Breakfast. They're serving God, but they're also serving the mafia at the same time. And that's just an anecdote that's really worthy of nothing, but it does signify that this is a bridge for money flowing in both directions.
Anybody else, please?
Thank you so much for making this a public event so I can attend from Hungary. I'm actually an SJD candidate in comparative constitutional law, but I'm working in reevaluating the separationist model of secularism within Europe. So these are really questions that really interest me. So it was, my question would be, do you only analyze this engagement of social movements, which can also be considered as counter movements to the movements that are human rights oriented? Or do you look at the totality of all of the policies enacted in a country, because they usually follow with the blockage of gender studies program on the academic level, curtailing academic freedom. They also go with blocking the ratification of the Istanbul Convention, and so on and so forth. So I was just interested, because your research is very interesting to me. Do you also look at all of these other developments and how these counter movements are involved, or you specifically concentrate on marriage equality? And thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. I think I can answer now. So as I pointed at the beginning, it is an ongoing research. So my main focus now was the marriage, because the marriage was debated in Romania, in Slovakia, and in Croatia. And I feel this debate. I feel how the society is divided in two parts, like liberal and traditional. And that's why I thought that it's a common point that I can begin with. So I focus mainly on this. But I think for the future, and I'm working also on paper now, I will take even short look on what is happening after the referendum. And it is very interesting, again, because in Croatia, even if the referendum was successful, they legalized them, like they included a civil partnership. In Slovenia also, but in Slovakia and Romania, nothing happened after this, even if the human rights activists, they celebrated as a victory, but the government or parliament, they didn't want to move forward to legalize civil partnerships. And again, looking at the messages and how they are acting, we could see in Slovakia that now they're organized themselves, trying to stop the ratification of Istanbul Convention, you pointed very well. This is now an instrument. So we are moving actually from the sexual minority rights to a broader community. Yeah, like the Istanbul Convention is about violation against women. Now they are trying to block this. In Russia, we have the same debate now. In Russia now is the lawmakers are trying to adopt anti-violation legislation, and these conservative movements are against. In Romania, so far, no, but in Romania we have a different context. Like it's very hard to promote the laws that are against abortion or gender rights, because in Romania during Ceausescu regime, communist regime, the abortion was prohibited. So people now are very sensitive. So yeah, for sure. If we are looking at what happened next the referendum, we can see that these coalitions and alliances now are working in different way, but with the same purpose. Now in Romania, they started to promote homeschooling, which again is very interesting, and they are against sexual education. So there are different clues that you can look at and to connect what happened at the local level with what happened at the international level. So yeah, we can talk more about if you want in the future. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? I cannot see everybody, so if anybody. Well, then let me add something. Obviously, you are looking at a confluence of different actors. On the one hand, you argue, most of them originated from below, from local civic organizations. Then, of course, as the question by Dorjana, those are civic organizations that very frequently are also responses to other existing civic organizations at home or abroad. Then you have, of course, the question of the relation with political parties, because those are, as you point out, civic organizations. Some of them try to ally with political parties and are successful, others not. So in analyzing, obviously, the next question is, what is the relation between them and political parties? Third, or all of them use religious discourse, but secular, religious. And then the question is whether actually they have really close links with established religious institutions, organizations, or not. This, even at the local level, already you have here a confluence of factors, and this will be determined to a large extent the dynamics of each referendum in each country. And then, of course, you have the transnational level, which again, you should not only look for the conservative transnational moral majorities, you also look for very much liberal. European Union is a fundamental force, and many of these movements are attempts to preempt what otherwise they fear will come from Western Europe. So so you have to look, and then you have the two external actors of Russia and the United States. So those is a confluence of all of these actors are there in all of these cases. But the presence, more active or less active, is something for you to analyze. But you should have into account precisely this confluence of local actors, political parties, religious institutions at the local level, and then obviously, because you point out, each of them follow years of already political negotiations in parliament, within parliament, or not. Mm-hmm. So it's very important that you take all these factors into account when you go into develop a final kind of manuscript comparing those things. I gave time to people to think some, yes, please.
Meanwhile, if I may just a follow-up, I totally agree with the point that you raised up. As I pointed in the conclusion, it's more the referendum are products of opportunity structures. And I think why the moment of happening of the referendum is also on one hand due to what happened international level, but also at the local level, because these domestic actors, they existed, and this conservative movement and liberal movement existed. I think now they are just working at the local level, becoming more visible, more stronger, and actually the external actors are looking at the suitable moment, and when they feel strong enough, and probably when they are having these alliances with political actors, because politicians are also very important in a country, and as I pointed, when they are very present or less present, then we can expect different results. So thank you so much, Jose. For sure, I'll expand this in my research.
Good. I gave people time to think. Their questions, comments, please. Anybody would like to add something? Well, then I thank you, all of you. First of all, I thank you, Tatiana, for your willingness to present. And we, I don't know whether we have the chance to say farewell to you, and when this farewell will become a reality, given the uncertainties of international travel these days. But we're very happy to have had you with us this year, and we wish you much success in your immediate academic career, your dissertation, the research, and for the future. Please do keep in touch with us. And thank you to all of you for participating. It was good to see you, the people within the Berkeley Center. Obviously, we don't see each other so much those days. And thank you especially those of you who join us from close or from afar, even from Budapest. So thank you very much to everybody. And thank you to the organizers, Simon and Ruth. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.